Okay, so I'm here with congressional candidate for New York District 3, Mr. George Santos. George, how are you doing this morning?
Good to be here, Joseph, with you.
Good. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this again. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So the last three congressional races in your district have been won by Democratic candidates. This year, the incumbent Democrat, Tom Suozzi, has raised over $2 million in contributions for his campaign. So what strategies are you and your campaign imposing to kind of get more voters?
Well, so let's start off with yes, the last three election cycles. First off, it was Steve Israel, a very long-term Democratic incumbent who sat in the seat, and he decided to retire shortly after the redistricting of the district, which was once Peter King's district. Essentially, my opponent Tom Suozzi has had it. I'd say he's had a leg up for him in his congressional bids ever since he started. In 2016, when it was an open seat, he ran against extremely competent State Senator Jack Martins. The only issue was Jack Martins should have been congressman, despite the common narrative that it's a Democratic district, where although it can be in registration higher Dems versus Republicans by a very thin margin, it's also a very moderate and very conservative district. It's a district where people want to go to and raise their families. So Congressman Suozzi rode the gravy train because he got caught up in the Trump outrage and anti-Trump sentiment, and that's why he's been sitting there for 2 terms. This time around, I think it's simple and quite evident that his message is tone deaf to the ones of his constituents, where he is in favor of abolishing the police and defunding the police in an area where law and order is essentially the #1 priority for the residents. Money, special interest money that he's raised, yes, I've seen $2 million. Most of it is special interest in several industries that want to take over Long Island, such as real estate and developers who want to come in and blow up our Long Island into a new Manhattan. So with that said, I'm not very scared of the money that's in his race, because money doesn't win elections. People win elections, votes win elections. And Tom Suozzi's lost an election with $2 million in the bank before when he was county executive. So I'm not very concerned about him outspending me or outraising me and guaranteeing him a victory, because we saw when he lost his reelection for county executive with $2 million in the bank. So I'm not fazed at all whatsoever.
Good point. So you mentioned law enforcement, how he's in favor of abolishing the police. Now on your website, you cite that law enforcement is very important to you, and you just mentioned how important it is to the district. I actually live in the district, so I know how important, law enforcement is for the people here. So what, and especially with everything going on in society today with the Black Lives Matter protests and social injustice and such like that, and like you said, the movement now to abolish the police. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think it's simple. Law and order will always prevail, right? Black Lives Matter. It's a very catchy phrase. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Every life matters, right? Doesn't matter what color or what race you're from. But it's important to cite that law and order must be pivotal, and it must not be disregarded. We're a society built of laws, and with those laws, we continue to function as a great society that the United States is. And I'm very proud to say I've gotten major law enforcement endorsements, as you can see on my palm. Over 10 law enforcement agencies have backed me. And the funny thing is, these are 10 law enforcement agencies who have backed Congressman Suozzi in his 2 first terms for Congress. So let that sink in. I think it's important that we look at this for what it is. Long Island is a suburban area. We come here. We live in Long Island. You know why your parents moved here. You know why most of the people moved here, so they can raise their children in a safe environment, good school quality, and also be away from the hecticness of the city. And take it from me, I grew up in the city. I was a kid in the city. I went to school in the city. It's not fun. It's very diverse and all, but it's pedal to the metal at all times, and it's not where most people want to raise their families. And keep in mind, public safety will forever be the #1 priority for any parent or any individual adult in America. So this idea that the police is going to be abolished and defunded and reformed and guns taken away from them and they're going to apply the law based on counseling, It's not going to happen. It's absolutely crazy.
So would you leave would you leave the police as is, or would you do any reform to police?
I would actually, yeah, I would reform the police. I would make the police stronger, better trained, and I would weed out anybody who is a liability for the police force, such as the officers in Minneapolis who had the mishap with George Floyd.
Mm. Okay, I got you.
That's
So
the kind of reform I believe in. I believe in investing in bettering the police, not in destroying the police.
100%. So you just mentioned how you grew up in a pretty tough area of North Queens, and how your mother, she shaped you as a person. You and your mother were actually very active back in the 90s, giving back to the community, giving back to various organizations, assisting with people with medical diseases such as, what's it called? Um, Epidermolysis, I think I said.
Yes.
Yeah, I said there. Okay, so
You can save yourself a mouthful and just say EB.
yeah, oh, EB, okay, all right, thanks. So like I said, you've been very proactive in your young life, giving back to the community. So two things. How has your growing up in North Queens shaped you to become a congressman, and how will you give back to the community in District 3?
Even in working together. I grew up in a community in Jackson Heights, Queens, which is a very intense immigrant community to two amazing parents. And they came to this country in search of the American dream. They did it legally. Hence, I was born here, first generation born American. And at a very young age, my mom always taught me the value of give back. You know, even if it's not a lot, you know, I look at it this way. If you have a little bit left over and you can spare 10% of whatever that little bit is, let's say you have $10 at the end of the week, oh, this kind of left over for me, and you can take out $1 from that and do good with it, I super encourage people to do that always. Obviously, if you can't, don't do it. You know, not everybody's in the position of giving. But if you're in that position and you find yourself able to apply some kind of difference in somebody's life, it is so rewarding. And I believe that community service it's a must. You shouldn't work for the community just to show off and take pictures like my opponent does. He's, as I call him, he's the king of photo ops. He loves a good photo op of him sweeping the streets, shoveling something, carrying a box, when in reality we know that for the past 26 years he's been a limousine liberal, and he doesn't really go out there. I've been out there. I not only have I grown up with this value and these principles, but I also founded my own nonprofit organization. Prior to running, I decided to close it. It was an animal rescue, and we were able to do a lot of great work with animals in the community, and it spun from Queens to Nassau County. It went all the way as far as Staten Island in New Jersey. I mean, we had a great organization. We were able to save animals, dogs, cats, horses. I mean, at one point I stuck in 8 baby jumping goats in my car all the way in New Haven, Connecticut, put them down because they were all male and they were going to be, you know, killed.
Yeah.
The guy had no use for male goats, and you know, like it's things like that. I think that's I know how to get dirty and really be part of the community and clean up a street and unclog sewage, rescue a kitty, work with the fire department, all of that stuff. And I think that those are values everybody would love to have in a congressman, because you know, you would have almost a guarantee that you have somebody there that's of the people, from the people, and for the people. And I think it's important that we have that kind of leadership in DC. It's about time we start ridding Congress from lawyers. I mean, it's been proven to be extremely ineffective to have so many lawyers in Congress.
So pretty much, you just mentioned how you've been out there a lot, and there's many videos online of you actually literally being out in the community, outside of hotels, holding public events, going to rallies, showing your face. So like that, like you said, is very important. So how can you sway, and also as being a first generation American, the majority of immigrants that come to this country vote liberal. So how can you sort of sway voters to your side, how can you kind of sway voters to your side while showing your face?
Yeah, so here's a quick fact. A lot of people think that immigrants come here and by the time they have the right to vote, that they'll vote liberal. That's a very interesting perception that the Democrats have very well branded and created throughout the years, but it's not factual. My mother, the moment she became a registered voter in the United States as a citizen, she voted Republican. Same as my father and most of my family. And I know a lot of other families like that. The thing is, it's the majority uneducated, the uneducated majority allow themselves to be swayed that way in believing that if you don't vote Democrat, you're going to be deported, or you're not going to have benefits, or you can't go to school, because Republicans apparently don't like public schools, and Republicans want to abolish free education from your kids, and which is all not true. I mean, it's insane, but it's marketing, and the Democrats have been able to put a stronghold in the African American community, in the minority communities for decades, at the fault of the GOP. I say the Republican Party carried the torch of being the party of the people up until the 60s, and up until the late 60s, and then somewhere along the early 70s, we abandoned the cause. And the Democrats scooped up on it, and ever since, they've taken complete control over minority communities across the country. But
I'm sorry to cut you off. Can you kind of talk more about that?
Absolutely. So I'll give an example. We were the first party, and I'm going to go back as far as the 1800s. In Mississippi, we were the first party in this country to have a black, the African-American man serve in Congress in the state of Mississippi. You know, we were taking over the Civil War, and there were still slaves, active slaves working in camps, in farms, in the South. And we had just elected a black man to Congress in the state of Mississippi in the late 1800s. We were the party who fought racism, segregation. We were the party who fought slavery. We were the party who fought for the equal rights movement, for women to have the right to vote. We did all that. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, you know, and I say this very often. If John F. Kennedy was alive, he'd be a Republican today, because the Democrat Party has always been the party of the KKK, slavery, segregation, and unequal rights for men and women. So in up until the late 60s, as I said, the Republicans carried that torch, abolished segregation and all of that stuff. And I just don't know where we dropped the ball, and we kind of stopped working that angle, because we gave black, brown Americans the equal rights to life, which was beautiful. You know, Martin Luther King died for this. And I can't believe that we're going back to segregation times, where now I see this uprise of all black dorms, all black study halls and colleges. Martin Luther King didn't die for this. He's turning in his grave. His ancestors are upset right now. You know, this is not what we fought for.
How can you so you mentioned, yeah, like you said, the Martin Luther King thing, very, like, it honestly strikes home with me, because he's someone who I look up to, that we've all probably look up to. He's one of the greatest
He's an example in our country, yeah.
So what will you do if elected to kind of bring people back together in such a divisive time?
So with this exceedingly polarized political atmosphere and this environment that is absolutely toxic, I think it's about time we stop engaging in partisan politics and we start engaging in working together. We need to become more unified as a nation. Look, Democrats, Republicans, we all want the same things. We want safe schools, we want good education, we want safe communities, we want equal opportunities, we want everybody to thrive. The thing is, we agree on 70% of our agendas are identical. It's the top 30% that everybody has some wishful thinking. I wish more pink, I wish more blue, or whatever the thing is. You know, why are we arguing on the top 30% things, extremely polarized left and right, instead of working in the center with the bottom 70% chunk that we agree on? You know, the president just yesterday put forward a option for stimulus of 1.8 trillion, much to my dislike. I think it's a lot of money. And Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, refuses to work with him. She does not want to take care of the problem at hand. She wants her wish list embedded into that and comprehensive what the president, it seems that what the president is offering is very comprehensive, and you're still engaging in partisan politics, and she doesn't have a good answer for it. So I think we got to start working together on what we agree on, and then we'll leave the things we disagree on for a later date. This country needs people in DC to work together, not fight each other constantly.
So there's been actually a lot of division in District 3 too, specifically, like a lot of protests for both sides of the coin. What specifically will you do if elected to kind of bring people in District 3 together?
I think it's very simple. Our district is it's a beautiful district. I mean, it's the North Shore of Long Island. It can't get any prettier than that, right? We have the Sound, we have Little Neck Bay, we have the beautiful developments of Dix Hills and Manhasset, and it's just gorgeous. You know, you can't ignore the fact that we have one of the prettiest areas in all of New York, and potentially the country. I think it's beautiful. I think it's easy to start working with the entire community. I think the moment we start reminding people how great of a community we are, how great of a place we are in the North Shore, that once commonality and common sense kicks in and we start talking about public safety and keeping our schools at a great functioning education level. I mean, within our district, we have the #1 school district in the country. It's Jericho School District. Did you know that?
No.
It is the #1 school district in all of the United States of America. Sits in Jericho. And number 13 is also in Great Neck. And I think in Dix Hills, we have number 29 or 39, something like that. So there's 3 premier top 50 school districts in our district. This is easy. That's all you got to talk to. You got to talk to the quality of our schools, the quality of life we have, and we really need to talk about issues that hit home, like infrastructure. We need to upgrade our electrical grid. Everybody agrees on that. So let's start working on things we all agree on. Let's upgrade our electrical grid so every time there's a storm, we don't go out of power. I'm surprised that with the storms yesterday, for Monday and Tuesday, for the last 48 hours, we didn't have a lot of outages. Minor spottings here and there because of trees and whatnot, but all in all, it was a fortunate storm for us, unlike the previous one that we had a couple of weeks ago. So we need to start working on things that will benefit the lives of everyday Long Islanders and New Yorkers living in the 3rd Congressional District, and that's how we'll unify the district again.
So you just mentioned the electrical grid. That's definitely a big one. PSE&G, they struggled back in the storm a couple of weeks ago to kind of maintain that power and kind of get people back on track. It took them a while because their technology kind of crapped out on them and stuff. So do you see yourself, if elected, do you see yourself kind of working with these big tech companies to kind of improve this infrastructure, or do you see yourself working more independently?
So the way I look at it is, if these big tech companies are willing to do what's right, I'll definitely work with them. If they're going to come to me just with lobbying dollars and trying to convince me to give them more concessions and more, that's absolutely not going to happen. I mean, when it pertains to working with big tech and with the electrical, the energy industry, you have to be very, very smart, because they're smarter. No matter how smart you are, they'll always be smarter. That's why they have all these huge concessions and all these huge contracts. PSE&G was a disgrace during the storm. If we're going to be honest, 460,000 homes went out of power the day of the storm, and it took up to 10 days for 90% of the power to be restored, and an additional 5 days for the latter 10%. So it was a total of 15 days from beginning to end of power outages, with every day getting, oh, it's tomorrow. Initially, it was going to be 3 days. And from 3 days, tomorrow, up until 15 days, when the very last house got their power back. Thousands of food spoiled, thousands of people who needed, electricity to work from home were not able to work from home, which resulted in loss of wages. So we're already suffering from a lockdown from this pandemic that's already ruining our economy, and we can't even count on our electrical system, on our electrical grid. Shame on PSEG. I tried to contact them for comment. Nobody ever got back to me. I went out, I took the fight to their doorstep. I went to their headquarters in Long Island, and nobody ever spoke to acknowledge me. So here's the deal. I will continuously fight, because I sent a letter up to Attorney General Tisha James for her to open an investigation. I know that the actual congressman in Long Island did the same, but I think it's about time we start sending a strong message to PSEG saying, hey, you're not going to get away with it anymore. Let's start moving,
So like you said, definitely the electrical problem was huge, but also, as you just mentioned, the economy has been awful because of the pandemic. So you have an pretty extensive economic background. You went to Baruch. I have a cousin that goes there. A couple of friends of mine go there. So I know how prestigious that their business program is and their economic program. You were the youngest. You started off at Goldman Sachs. You moved on to Linkbridge Investors, where you're the youngest vice president of that company, and now you're presently the regional director of Harbor City Capital. So how can your economic background improve the economy? How can you use this to improve our economy?
So unlike a lawyer, I actually know numbers. Currently at Harbor City Capital, I manage a $1.5 billion fund, right? And I know how to manage it well. I give record returns. To anybody who watches this, they'll understand I'm giving, a 12% fixed yield income return a year, which nobody in the market's giving 4, and we're giving 12. We're also giving up to 20 to 26% in IRR return on our investors' capital. So if there's something I know how to do is manage dollars and grow them. I think we can put this country back on its feet alone with what's called dry powder. We have right now between $6 and $7 trillion of dry powder in the private sector in America. That means money that has not been invested. It's money that's sitting with major corporations like Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, Stepstone, BlackRock, so on and so forth, Merrill Lynch, just sitting by, waiting for the proper opportunity, because the market is too volatile. There's too much volatility out there, right? The uncertainty of the election, that all plays into how investors allocate their dollars. So all this money standing by is called dry powder. Instead of the federal government writing more trillion-dollar bills that they will never be able to pay back, we're creating money we do not attain, we do not possess. Right? Instead of doing that, we should give an incentive to massive corporations holding on to these dollars to create a trickle-down effect to the communities, to the little economies of Little Glen Cove, Little Dix Hills, Little Oyster Bay, and combine these little local economies will power up and rev up the big engines of economies such as New York and Boston and so on and so forth. It's through those incentive packages that we're going to yield success for America. It is not through having more litigating lawyers in Congress coming up with bills inflated with numbers of money we do not possess, and we're just printing away. That's the major issue in America today.
So in our district, a lot of people have, lost their jobs, unfortunately. A lot of people have been put on, temporary leave or furloughs or what have you since March. And people are still suffering. People still haven't got back on their feet, which is, unfortunate. So how, obviously, we just talked about all these great things that you will do for the economy. But what specifically will you do to kind of make people get back on their feet in terms of job security?
So as far as our district, which is a fun fact, I have this report from a couple of days ago.
Crap, I lost you. Hello, wait, can you hear me? Hold on. Oops, sorry. Oh, sorry, I lost you. My bad. I'm so sorry. It cut out for a second. I'm so sorry about that.
All right, I'll start again.
Okay, sorry.
Our district, right? As far as our district and how it weathered during the pandemic, we actually didn't do so bad. Right? The numbers just came back in a couple of days ago. We didn't do so bad as far as job loss or wealth or decline in wealth. And the reason being is our district historically is a fairly moderately well-established district where the average income for adults between the age of 20 and 35 a year per adult is $126,000. So yes, there were a lot of people who were immediately impacted, but not so much monetarily, mainly socially, right? They're not going into work anymore. They're working from home. So there hasn't been a huge impact, economic impact on the 3rd Congressional District. There have been certain areas of the district that have been affected. And I believe that, the government is working day in and day out to accommodate those folks and to get them back on their feet. My plan is to, through the power of empowering the economy locally and job creation of local businesses with the dry powder I mentioned prior, is what is going to create the comeback of this district and where people will be able to go back to work and small business owners will be able to start up their businesses again and open their doors and so on and so forth. So I think it's going to be through a very well planned and executed trickle down economics that we're going to rescue the job creation, the economic engine, and actually the growth. Because look, we still have to pay that $2.2 trillion that we wrote in early March. And guess what? That's not going to be through taxing the people to death. It's going to be through economic growth. Because if the Democrats think that they're going to tax all of us to death, they're in big trouble, because that will not fly well with the American people. We need to pay back those $2.2 trillion through economic growth, and it is by empowering local economies that we will do so.
So, as the first gay congressional candidate of the GOP, you're probably very proud. And now the majority of, I'm sure you know this, the majority of LGBTQ voters tend to vote liberal. So how can you kind of sway those voters into supporting your cause?
So here's the deal. It's history, right? The GOP in the state of New York never endorsed a gay congressional candidate. And if elected, I'll be the first ever openly gay congressional candidate to go to Congress, which I think is freaking awesome. The reason I say that is because it just shows that our party is not what the Democrats like to preach. Oh, they're racist, they're homophobes, they're misogynists, they're this, they're xenophobes, and all of that. That's not true. I mean, look, I got 3 county chair people, 4 town chair people, and an entire state party and committee to endorse me. I mean, come on. Look around you. It's 2020. Who cares what you do with your private life? I'm as conservative as you are. I'm as conservative as my grandfather was. I can guarantee you that. The thing is that people are so hung up on titles. And as I call them, the alphabet people have forgotten who they are, and they live by the ideology of the alphabet. LGBTQKUBV, whatever it is that they add to that year after year, and now there's plus signs, minus signs, a / backslash. I don't know what all of that means. I have no clue. All I know is that I'm a man, I'm an American, and I am a Republican. And what I do constantly to bridge that, I start talking to people. I was at a bar recently celebrating with a few of the guys from the PBA. We had just deployed a very productive walk, right? We were door knocking, we were out there. So we all went to a bar. So we're all drinking, we're all talking. And then there's a group of guys and they notice and like, hey, why do you look so much like a politician? I said, I don't feel like I look like a politician necessarily, but well, I'm running for Congress. Oh, that's where I thought you were from. Let me guess, you're a Republican. I'm like, and why do you say that like it's a bad thing? Oh, because Republicans, I'm like, well, hold on, what if I told you I'm gay? You're not gay, you're playing with us. I'm like, no, go on my website and you can read it. And they go on the website, they're like, oh, why are you a Republican? Well, I believe in a free market, a free country, small government, little government interference in my life. And I also believe in my constitutional rights. The right to bear arms, the right to speak, that's free speech, the right to assemble, the right to religious belief without persecution, and the right to marry whoever the hell I want with no explanation due to anyone. You know what? The Republican Party supports all of that. And one of them look at me and say, but Donald Trump's homophobic. I'm like, no, he's not. He's appointed a gay man to the most important ambassadorship in the world to Germany, which was Rich Grenell. Who's that? I'm like, you see, that's exactly who the Democrats don't want you to know who he is. So essentially, we spoke, we had a very long, deep-rooted conversation, spoke a lot about my beliefs and whatnot. And I said, look, and by the way, do you guys want to be taxed to death, or do you want to have money left over to go buy your Louis Vuittons? And I think everybody agreed that they don't want to be taxed to death. So that was kind of the joke. And they laughed and said, oh, you have a point. I said, you know, it's about talking to people. Unfortunately, you can't sit down with the entire alphabet people because some of them are just so blocked and they have this wall in front of them and they refuse to listen to you. And it's very rare that you can actually have a common, decent conversation with them. And, you know, and I go it that way. Look, I put my message out there. I don't care if you're alphabet people, if you're, you know, alt-right, alt-left, or whatever the case is. All I care about is just be a person. Think for yourself. Believe in what you think is right for you, not in what people tell you and others tell you. Don't let peer pressure cave you in into voting a certain way. That's the best message I can give to people.
Now you just mentioned the peer pressure into forcing you to vote a certain way. As you mentioned, as we talked about before, you know, Tom Suozzi has raised $2 million in funds, heavy liberal district. But there are, like you mentioned, a lot of Suffolk County in general is a very conservative county. So, and you've been out there, you've been talking to people, you've been holding events, you've been going to bars, you've been outside hotels, getting people fired up. So, do you see yourself do you feel in your opinion, do you think that you're actually going to exceed expectations that people are foreseeing for this district?
Yes, I strongly believe that I can cause the biggest upset in this country in election-wise, and I'm strongly confident that my team is doing a very good job and that we're in the right path. The one thing that gives me more power every day is that I fight for the future of this country. I believe in having young people like yourself being afforded the opportunities I was afforded. And if we continue down the path we're going, I'm afraid that you and your generation and generations behind you might not have those same privileges and opportunities afforded to them because Democrats are so toxic to the environment. They're so toxic to life as a whole. And I'm fighting to make sure that that's not the case. I want to make sure I look one day, Joseph, and you might be the next congressional candidate of the United States 10 years from now, you know, and stepping down and saying, hey, here's your torch, I'm passing it on to you. That's what I aspire to do every day, is to see that younger people do good, because I did through hard work. I had all the odds stacked up against me. And I think that, yes, we will come out victorious in November. I think we have a good message. I think we have a campaign that sends out the truth, and we speak nothing but the truth. And my opponent said yesterday when we were on Meet the Candidates night, he's running based on his record. So if he's running on his record, everybody should be scared the hell out of their pants. You know why? A man who did what he did to Nassau County and made it the most expensive county in America. The state had to take over the county finances because it was out of control. He bankrupted the city of Glen Cove and went on to going down in history as one of the most incompetent executive leaders in New York State. The fact that he became congressman and says openly that he's the second coming of JFK and that he'll be president is besides me, and however he achieved it, only God knows. But like I said, he's been lucky and sucked into the anti-Trump sentiment in the district, and he's gotten himself elected and reelected, and I don't think it's going to happen this time around.
So pretty much, oh my God, I just forgot my question. Jeez, I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. It happens to the best of us.
So I appreciate that.
So Biden can't remember that he's running for president.
Oh, jeez. So pretty much, okay, it just came back to me. So the younger voters, as you said, you're a young guy yourself. There's plenty of young people in our district. The majority of young voters tend to vote to the left too. And with such a big name like Suozzi, running for running for re-election in this district. He has history in politics, and a lot of people will just see the name and kind of just, oh, Swazi, so we'll vote for him. So how can people say, how can young voters in particular say, oh, there's this new guy on the scene, he's young, he has an agenda, he wants to improve the lives of people. How can they kind of say, we choose him instead of Swazi?
Well, the same way that the American people chose the new guy in the block in 2016 versus the established politician, right? Isn't that what happened essentially with the presidential campaign?
Pretty much, yeah.
America chose something different versus what they already knew. I think that that's the same type of message I'm putting out there. I'm different. I'm young. I have a different perspective. I'm not out there for myself. I quite frankly am fortunate enough to say I don't need to go out there to further. I have a great career. I have a very successful career. And I believe that I'm doing exactly backwards of what everyone else does. Most of these people go to Congress, build a name, benefit from their time in office to then go on to having successful careers. I built a career for myself. I built a knowledge and something where I add value. And now I want to apply my private sector experience to public service. That's the difference there. And as far as younger voters, I actually connect very well with the younger generations because I know how to think like them. I know what's going on through their mind while they're, hanging out. And I'll give a great example. The average 19 to 20-year-old now is making on average about 30 grand a year, right? With their internships or whatever it is they're doing, they're still going through school and they're kind of struggling because it's not a lot of money. You got to buy books and you got to try to avoid as many loans as you can. And you want to hang out and you want to have a girlfriend and you want to go to the movies and you want to go to dinner. And it's always that constant Venmo, Zelle, I'll send you 10, here, give me 20 kind of.
I know what you mean.
I get that, and I understand how it works. It's the hustle and bustle and with your head above water. And I can talk to those points. I think it's fun, but everybody's happy. Nobody, look, you're 19, right? You're not upset that you're not a millionaire, right? Because you're still working hard for it. You're in school, you're doing what you got to do. So I think it's important that people know that. And to vote for something different and something new is always exciting. So the moment I tell people, hey, I have no history in politics and I don't claim to be an expert in everything, but the one thing I can tell you I'm an expert in financial services. And I can help right now. The type of people we will need in Congress for the 117th Congress is people who can help this economy. It's a very challenging time for our economy, and we're going to need strong people who understand the economy and how it works and operates so that we can come out victorious.
So with that being said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Do you have a final message or any issue of importance that you want to give out to voters?
Absolutely. I put it this way. Whenever you think George Santos, think law and order, small businesses, and the economy, because those are the three things that I focus my campaign on. The reason being is law and order for the protection of our neighborhoods and our communities. The economy and small businesses is what's going to power moms and dads across this district to be able to provide for their children, for the future of their children. And the economy is what's going to empower the larger scale of this country in order for our children to have a future and for our younger generations to be able to excel and be afforded the same opportunities we were all afforded. And what I always tell people, vote with your heart. Think for yourself. Don't allow yourself to be influenced. Don't allow yourself to be manipulated or for peer pressure to cave in on you and sway your vote. Your vote is your choice. It is a secret, it is silent, and you don't have to share it. You can agree to death with somebody, but when you're in that ballot box, it is between you, your heart, and your conscience. And I think that it's very important to remember, do we want a socialist country? Because that's what Thomas Swazi is for. He's a proud honorary member of the squad who avidly advocates for socialism. I think it's a no-brainer, but I leave my trust in the hands of the people, and I trust them to make the right decision for them and for their future and for the future of our children.
Well, thank you so much. That was Mr. Santos. That was Mr. George Santos, a congressional candidate for the Republican Party of District 3 of New York. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for having me.